Well, I'm delighted to have back with us today Neil McCabe. He's the senior reporter for Human Events, and Neil was with Senator Rand Paul last night as he was giving his response to the president's speech representing the Tea Party. Neil, you know, it was interesting. How big was the coverage of Senator Paul's response? Do you know?
Well, I think it got very wide play on the internet, in the Twitterati. The Tea Party Express, which sponsored and hosted the response. This is their third year hosting a webcast of a Tea Party response to the State of the Union. They said that as soon as Rand Paul was announced as the one delivering the address, that the emails and the response was off the charts. I know everybody in D.C. was talking about both Rand Paul and Marco Rubio's responses.
Well, now you were with the senator before he gave the speech. Tell us about that.
Well, that was sort of interesting. That was sort of what I call a brush with history. You know, he came in around 9 o'clock. They figured that they would wait 5 minutes after the Rubio address, so their target was around 11. I think they gave it a little after 11. And he spent all through the State of the Union. He did sort of some practices, but he basically watched it with his staff, the President's State of the Union address, and sort of making the same comments that you or I would make in the living room. At one point, President Obama, when he said he wanted to raise the minimum wage to $9 an hour, Senator Paul just sort of looked around and said, well, if that works, why don't we just make it $20 an hour and everybody will have a good time, you know?
Yeah. Well, give us some of the kind of the points of his address. How would you summarize it?
I think the number one point is that Rand Paul is not a man from Washington, even though his father has had a long public career. Rand Paul came out as an ophthalmologist, he's a surgeon, he's a physician. He's somebody who said, hey, I thought Washington was messed up, and then when I got here, I really found out just how bad it is. And there's a lot of things here that don't make sense to me. One of the things he said was, you know, the senators, they don't even read the bills that they're voting on. This is unbelievable to him. He says, you know, with sequester, that's the mandatory cuts in the budget that will take place in 3 weeks that are part of the Budget Control Act of 2011. The president is the one who suggested sequester, these mandatory cuts. And now the president is saying, don't do sequester. In fact, the specific cuts, the sequester cuts for the Defense Department, were particularly President Obama's idea, something he negotiated for in a bill that he signed, and yet he's now criticizing Republicans for these defense cuts. And sort of Rand Paul is just sort of standing there like the regular American saying, what is going on here?
Well, how did he respond to the proposed more taxes? And he really doesn't want to spend cut. In fact, everything that the president gave last night, he said, oh, by the way, this won't raise the deficit one penny. I mean, how dumb is that?
Yeah, I think the senator was watching the State of the Union the way a lot of Americans were watching the State of the Union, just sort of shaking his head, and just it was almost unbelievable that the president was saying what he was saying with a straight face. And you know, it was really a long, unbelievable speech by the president. It was such a long speech that you know, I wondered how I had aged afterwards.
Well, I mean, with all due respect to the president and the whole process that goes on with this State of the Union address, it just appears to me he's lost all credibility. I don't see anybody taking anything he says seriously. Oh,
sure. And you know, when we talk about gun control, we're talking, you know, he says that his gun control measures deserve a vote in the House of Representatives. Well, the way you get people in the House of Representatives to cooperate with you is not to insult and ridicule them on national TV. And that's sort of what he was doing.
Right.
I was in a meeting a few days ago when people were talking about immigration, and one of the comments that somebody made, it says, you know, are we trying to solve an immigration problem, or are we trying to solve a political problem? And I think over and over again in the last night's speech, the president was really trying to solve political problems for himself and create political problems for the Republicans, regardless of how they affect the nation.
What was the senator representing the Tea Party, what was his response to the immigration and maybe even some of the foreign aid to countries?
Well, I thought that was one of his best lines with foreign aid, where he said that we should stop sending money and weapons to countries where they burn our flag. And I think that's probably a good place to start. On immigration, you know, the senator, he wants to welcome immigrants, and he wants to be the kind of country where people from around the world come. I mean, one of the lucky things about the American economy, that the reason why, frankly, why we've weathered the storms that other countries haven't so well, is that the best, most hardworking people from all over the world come to America. We should remain that place that people want to come. And I think that's what the senator was saying. He wants the party to be a welcoming party to new Americans, but at the same time, he doesn't want people to break the law, and he certainly doesn't want, you know, illegal aliens to be able to break our laws in a situation where, you know, the police officers can't arrest them. And I'm sure you're aware that there's a federal union that's actually suing the federal government to do their job. They're saying that the government is not allowing them to do their job, which is so upside down. And that's the Border Patrol Agents Union is actually suing the federal government for the right to enforce immigration laws.
Unbelievable. You know, obviously, the response doesn't have equal time that the president has, so it's a tough job to do, both for Senator Rubio and Senator Paul. Do you think they covered the bases pretty well, given the time slot they had?
No, I think they were both great addresses. I thought that Senator Rubio did a great job. He's such a smart guy, and he speaks very well. I thought that both men did very well. What I'm calling it is a Tea Party quarterback controversy, that you have sort of the flashy Marco Rubio, who's maybe prone to a fumble now and again when it comes to a water bottle, and then you have sort of the sure and steady Rand Paul, you know, who came in, did the job, drove down for the touchdown.
That's classic. That's great. What's your thoughts on the strength of the Tea Party these days?
That's really the big question. Of course, the 2010 election was one of those watershed pivots in American history. And then the question becomes, you know, what will they go the way of sort of the free soil parties or the agrarian populist movements, or will they become a legitimate party in their own right? I think the thing that the Democrats and the president were most afraid of was that the Republican Party apparatus would link up with the passion of the Tea Party, and that would be an unstoppable combination. And so they've done everything possible to drive a wedge between the Republican Party establishment and the Tea Party. Fortunately for the president and the Democrats, the leadership of the Republican Party had the same idea, and they fear the Tea Party more than the president.
Well, saying that, if the establishment side of the Republican Party puts up another establishment candidate, I can't help but think that the party could be in serious trouble.
Well, what could very well happen is that you have a situation where they just cut off the head, and then just, you know, if all of the passion and all of the activity and all of the activists, if everything that actually happens in the Republican Party is the result of the Tea Party, and then you have the leadership at the top, this sort of this small elite at the top, you could just remove that elite, and the Republican Party could be reborn, either as a new Republican Party or the Tea Party just takes its place.
Well, we'll have to see how that plays out. But do you sense, Neil, that over the next 2 years it's really going to be pedal to the metal for the president, because he knows he has a midterm election? So it seems to me this will be the time he'll go in the kamikaze mode to get his agenda accomplished, no matter what anybody says.
I think the president is up against some institutional hurdles that he will not be able to overcome. He's got a number of confirmation hearings still left to go, and each one of those confirmation hearings is going to sort of chip away at his political power and influence. He also has the continuing resolution fight that's looming.
Right.
He has the sequester in 3 weeks. And year 6 in a 2-year term for the party in the White House is very, very bad. It doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat. Year 6 is a very bad year for the party that controls the White House. And so he's up against that as well.
Wow. Do you think that well, let me ask you this. Back to Senator Paul.
Yeah.
What's his take on the budget and the proposal? What's the Tea Party saying about the deficit in the budget?
Well, I think the basic thing is that we have a spending problem, not a tax problem. And the senator mentioned in his speech last night that not only has the Senate not passed a budget since he's become a since before he's become a senator, the president's budget hasn't garnered a single vote in the Senate. And so it's almost absurd that you have, the mainstream media and the president and the Democrats are able to heap all of this blame on the House Republicans for not being cooperative, and yet the upper chamber, the Senate, that the Democrats control, has lifted nary a finger to actually pass a legitimate budget. And so you're basically boxing against a shadow, and you can't win.
All right, last question. I know you're busy.
Sure. I'm very busy.
I know you are. Why hasn't the Tea Party in the House pushed Boehner to just throw every curveball he can at the president and box him in?
Well, I think the problem with John Boehner is that as a younger congressman, he was part of Newt Gingrich's leadership team, and he still carries the emotional scars of Newt Gingrich's confrontations with Clinton. And so Boehner will talk a good game, and he certainly says and does all the right things until it becomes that final confrontation with the White House. And then he becomes an emotional invalid, unable to function, like Hooker at Chancellorsville. And so we're hoping that after the fiscal negotiations sort of really took him to town, that maybe he'll wise up. There's no chance of a coup in the next 2 years. So we're stuck with Boehner, and the only thing that we can do is hope that he works out his trauma.
Wow. Quite a statement. Thank you, Neil. You are a great guy, and say hi to all of our friends there at Human Events. We love what you guys do. Keep up the good work, my friend.
Hey, thanks a lot. Always speak well of Human Events.